Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Brenna. I'm the Director of Education here at Test Innovators. And our webinar today is focused on preparing for the ISEE with limited time. And the webinar is being recorded throughout. Feel free to type any questions you have in the comments. And if we have time at the end, I'll answer those questions. And we'll also review all questions that people wrote in after the webinar and respond to anyone we didn't get to. I know that we may have many different kinds of people here today: parents, students, families, people who work with schools we work with, administrators, tutors, much more. If you have any questions that are specific to your situation, please don't hesitate to contact us after the webinar as well. So I'll begin with an introduction to who we are. We are the leading test prep platform for the ISEE and the SSAT, and we've helped over 60,000 students get into the most selective schools. And these are just a few of the schools that students who've used our platform have been admitted to. Based on the years that we have spent helping students with test prep, we know that standardized test taking is a skill that you can master. And these tests are very different from other kinds of tests that students take. And so, like all skills, you have to learn and practice in order to improve. And once you've mastered the skill, you're best able to demonstrate all of your knowledge effectively on the test, which is our objective. Additionally, advances in technology have made it far easier to prep for the test. Technology allows you to quickly identify strengths and weaknesses, and then it provides the best tools to prepare efficiently and effectively. And these two tenets form the foundation of the tools and resources we've developed to help students prepare for the ISEE, and also inform all of the strategies that I'll be sharing with you in today's webinar. Over the years, we've developed some key strategies for success on the test, and those have come from many different places, from working with admissions departments, feedback from our students and network of tutors, and from data that's collected in our system. And some of the most important data that we collect are official ISEE test scores and admissions results. We've compiled that data and made it available, and I'll include a link to that resource along with the recording. It's extremely important to know what scores make you a competitive applicant at your target schools. This is an example of what our school data looks like. So if your student is interested in the school, you can see at a glance that scores in the yellow or green bands are considered competitive. Of course, there are many parts of the application that influence admissions decisions, but this can give you a good idea of the ISEE scores that we have found make students competitive applicants. For students who work with the Test Innovators platform, we take it even a step further. Your practice test scores are put in the context of your target schools, so you quickly know how you compare. In this example, for the first school on the students list, the practice scores are looking good. They're looking good for the verbal section, which is in the green there with a 7, looking just fine for reading. And then the quantitative and math achievement could use some work. Now here's the same student, same scores, but a different school, and you can see at a glance that for this school, the students' practice scores aren't quite competitive yet, and they have some more work to do before they take the official test. So let's talk about preparing for the test. So today I'm going to start by taking you through an overview of the test content, and we'll talk about some strategies that apply to the whole test, and then we'll dive into each section, highlighting strategies specific to each of those. And that'll include talking about the ISEE essay and why it's so important. Since our focus today is on preparing with limited time, I'll also focus on good, hard-hitting strategies that will have the greatest impact without taking much time to implement. So let's get started. Beginning by talking about the test. Schools use the ISEE to assess whether a student is a good fit at their school. And part of that, of course, is knowing how they'll handle the academics based on their score, but something you may not know is that schools are also looking to get to know you from your ISEE essay. And I'll talk more about that later. The test is divided into 5 sections. There's a verbal section, a reading section, 2 math or quantitative sections, and then an essay. And students can now take the ISEE multiple times. However, this may be irrelevant to many of you, depending on whether you've already taken the ISEE more than once, since we are now entering the winter testing season, which is December to March. So we are actually solidly in the winter testing season. And thus, if you haven't taken the test yet, you'll only have the opportunity to take the test once. And then the test is administered either on paper or on computers. So if you take it on specific testing dates at a local school, then it will be administered on paper, whereas if you take it by appointment at a Prometric testing center, you'll take a computerized test. You should do practice tests on paper and on computer to see which one is more comfortable for your student, or if you've already registered for the test and you know in which format you're going to be taking it, practice the same way that you'll be taking the official test. There are 3 levels of the test. For the majority of students, there's actually also a primary level for very young students. The lower level is for application to grades 5 and 6, middle level for application to grades 7 and 8, and upper level for application to grades 9 through 12. As you'll notice, students taking each of these tests, they can be from different grade levels. So an important thing to know is that scoring is normative according to grade, which means that you'll only be compared to students your age. So although you're seeing the same questions that a student who may be 3 years older than you is also seeing, odds are if there's a question that is far out of your educational experience and is perhaps designed more for one of the 11th graders taking that test, then probably all of the other younger students your age who are taking the test will also find that concept or question unfamiliar, and you'll only be compared to those students and their performance. So some quick statistics about what the test looks like. For the lower level of the test, students answer 127 multiple choice questions in addition to the writing prompt. The test as a whole takes 2 hours and 20 minutes to complete. For the middle and upper levels of the test, there are 160 questions, so it's a bit longer in addition to the writing prompt, and the whole test takes 2 hours and 40 minutes. And there are 2 breaks during the test, so you get 5-minute breaks between sections. And the structure, what that all looks like, you start with the verbal reasoning section, then the quantitative reasoning section, then you get a 5-minute break after that. So you'll take 2 sections to get a 5-minute break. Then you do reading comprehension when you come back from the break, then math achievement. You'll notice math always falls right before the break. So then you get another 5-minute break before you come back and you finish by doing that writing sample. So now that you know a bit about the test, let's talk about test prep strategy. There are many factors that go into determining your preparation plan, and those include how well you know the material initially, how much time you have to prepare, what your current time management skills are, how many times you'll be able to take the official test. All of those are factors that you'll consider. Since right now there's limited time for everyone, we'll be focusing on strategies that help you get ready for the test with limited time. Regardless of how long you have the answers to all of those questions on the previous slide, the first step in every preparation process is always to take a full-length practice test or benchmark. And taking that practice test, no matter how close it is to your official test day, will give you familiarity with the test's style, difficulty, and content so that you know what to expect when you get to the official test. It will also allow you to identify strengths and weaknesses so that you know how to prepare. So some of the things you'll be looking for in the results of the practice test will be if there are concepts that you didn't know, if you managed your time effectively, if you used elimination strategies well, and so on. So since your first step is to take a full-length practice test, where do you find these full-length practice tests? Of course, you can find full-length practice tests at Test Innovators, testing centers, many different websites. A few things that are really important to look for. You want to start by ensuring that the test is an accurate reflection of current test material. You'll also want access to quick scoring so that you're able to see how you did. And it's also great if there's an online testing option so you can have timing data, since time management is such a crucial part of this test. For example, with our platform, we'll show you exactly how you allocated time on every section. As I said, effective time management is critical to being successful in the ISEE. So with this graph, you're able to see exactly how long you took on each question. So each of the questions is the y-axis over the duration of the section, which is your x-axis. And so with this student, for instance, we can see that they went through every question of the section, and then they returned and checked their work for most of the questions. Insights like these are critical to help students become effective test takers and also to foster a reflective process for learning. As you prepare for the ISEE, there are 2 important strategies for students to know that apply across the entire test. And the first of those is the guessing strategy. And this is pretty straightforward. On the ISEE, there is no wrong answer penalty, so you should never leave any question blank. Even with questions you don't have time to read, you have no idea how to answer, you have a 1 in 4 chance of getting it right with no penalty for answering incorrectly. So you should always answer every question. The second overall strategy for the test is a time management strategy. As I said, using your time effectively on the ISEE is critical. Every correct answer gives you the same number of points, so your goal is to answer as many questions correctly as possible. You don't want to waste valuable time on a hard question when you could instead answer 3 easy questions correctly in the same amount of time. Your first step is always to group questions by difficulty, easy, medium, and hard. So what does that mean? Every time you read a question, you want to ask yourself, do I know how to do this? And if the answer is yes, absolutely, that's an easy question. If the answer is probably, if I had enough time, that's a medium question. If you really aren't sure about it, you maybe don't even know what the question is talking about, that's a hard question, and generally you'll skip that. So in your first pass through any section, you're going to answer the easy questions, the ones that you absolutely know how to do. You're going to mark the medium questions to come back to, and just skip those hard questions. After you've gone through the whole section, you'll come back and answer those questions that you had marked, the medium ones that you probably knew how to do if you had enough time. And then only if you have time remaining at the very end should you try the hard questions that you skipped. I'm seeing that I have a message that perhaps someone can't hear anything. Could someone write in with a message if you are able to hear me right now, so I can see if I need to troubleshoot on my end? Okay. It seems that if any of you are having trouble hearing, that may be a technical issue on your end. Perfect. Looks like everyone can hear me. Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. So here we were talking about time management, starting with the easy questions, the ones you absolutely know how to do. Come back to the questions that you know how to do, but might take you a little bit longer, and only do those really hard questions that you're pretty unsure of in your very last pass through the test. Now, an important thing to remember, especially for those of you taking the paper test, be really careful with your bubble sheet. If you're ever skipping questions and coming back to them, you want to make sure that you don't get off in your bubble sheet. This seems like something you should go without saying, but too many students have tragic occurrences on test day where they accidentally bubble in the wrong thing and then spend too much of their time having to erase the bubble sheet and figure it all out and try to align it correctly. So always make sure that you're just being really careful with that. The question that you're bubbling in the answer for is the question that you're trying to bubble in the answer for. So now let's get into the sections. We'll start with the verbal section. So the lower level has 34 questions to answer in 20 minutes. The middle and upper levels have 40 questions to answer in 20 minutes. And this section has 2 different types of questions. So the first half will always be synonyms, and the second half will be sentence completions. So the synonyms questions look like this. You're given a single word, and then you have to choose the best synonym from among the 4 answer choices. And this is about the level of vocabulary you would expect to see on the upper level of the test. Your strategy for these questions is always to start by covering up the answer choices. And the reason for that is that test writers design this test to be tricky, and looking at the answer choices will often mislead you. So cover up the answer choices and think of your own answer first to avoid being tricked by the test writers, tempting wrong answers that if you read them first, they seem associated with the word in some way, although they're not actually having the same core meaning as the given word. Come up with your own definition and then pick the answer choice that's closest to yours. This is a great way to avoid errors on questions that you know how to do. Again, with limited time, one of your focuses is simply to make sure that for all the questions you know how to do, you get them all right. Of course, you're sometimes going to run into words that you don't know. The vocabulary on the ISEE tends to be pretty challenging, so students frequently encounter words that they don't know. So when you don't know a word, start by trying to break it apart. See if you recognize any parts of the word, maybe they're parts of other words that you know, and see if you can use that to figure out what the word probably means, or to eliminate some answer choices that just couldn't possibly be in line with those parts of the word. You can also think about if you've ever heard it before. Maybe you don't know exactly what it means, but you have heard it before and you may have a bit of context for what the word might be, where the word might be used. And you can, again, use that to eliminate some answer choices and make an educated guess. A last strategy, if you still are drawing a blank on any of those, give the word in the answer choices a charge. So charge the words. You want to give it a plus or a minus. So what that means is if it's a word that seems like a good thing, you're going to give it a plus sign. If it's a word that seems like a bad thing, you'll give it a minus sign. And you'll do that for both the given word and the answer choices. And of course, this is something that should match. So if you give the original word a plus, then any answer choice that doesn't get a plus, you should eliminate that answer choice because it can't be correct. So you'll always eliminate all those non-matching answer choices and thus be able to make a good educated guess. When it comes to the verbal section, a big piece, particularly for the synonyms, is simply knowing a lot of words. So studying vocabulary is a question. Should I study vocabulary? If so, how much, when, how? For any of you who have under 2 weeks before you're taking the official test, which may be true for many of you, it's better to focus your time just on practicing strategies. Focus on the words you know and eliminating wrong answers. And don't worry too much about studying vocabulary since it will have limited usefulness in terms of you going into that official test and having a much broader vocabulary. However, if you're a student who does have 2 weeks or more to prepare, then studying vocabulary is a good idea. Make sure that the vocabulary you use is at the appropriate level. And additionally, learning roots can be beneficial since roots can be applied to many different words. The second part of the verbal section is sentence completions, and students answer these questions after they get through the synonyms portion of the verbal section. In addition to single blank sentence completions like this one, where we have just one blank in the sentence and we're filling in with one of these answer choices, the lower level also has questions that require phrase completions. So instead of one word in the answer choices that we're filling in with, you would have a whole phrase there. And the upper level also has 2 blank sentence completions. So same idea, but 2 blanks instead of 1. The strategy for all of these questions is the same. And this is a question that's about the level of difficulty you might expect to see on the middle level of the test. So reading through the sentence, we're going to underline critical information, including any signal or clue words that give us a hint about what we're looking for. And then without looking at the answer choices, we'll come up with a word that we think best fits in the blank. So here we go. The Komodo dragon does not have a blank sense of hearing, which is why scientists originally believed the species to be deaf. So we're saying it doesn't have a something sense of hearing, which is why we thought it was deaf. I might fill in the blank with something like good. It doesn't have a good sense of hearing, that's why they thought they were deaf. Now I look at the answer choices and I say, which of these answer choices is closest to the word I came up with to fill in the blank? That will be acute, so I'll pick answer choice A. Sentence completions are a great place to make improvement in short time. While the synonyms section relies heavily on knowledge, you have to know all this vocabulary, the sentence completion questions mostly require a new skill. Many students haven't encountered many questions like this prior to the ISEE. They just have to learn the best strategies for using clues in the sentence to choose the best answer. So your strategy, same as for these synonyms, essentially. You'll come up with your own answer first. You'll look out for important signal words. And then the best thing you can do to improve is just to practice so that it's second nature to implement this when you get to the official test. With that, let's talk about the 2 math sections of the ISEE. The first of these is called quantitative reasoning, and the second is math achievement. So for quantitative reasoning, for the lower level, you have 38 questions in 35 minutes, middle and upper levels, 37 questions in 35 minutes. And then for math achievement, you have lower level it's a little bit shorter, 30 questions, 30 minutes. Middle and upper, you have 47 questions and 40 minutes. And the subjects that are tested on these sections, at every level, the math relies heavily on a strong foundation in arithmetic. So you want to be comfortable with addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, positive and negative numbers, fractions, and decimals in order to be able to do many of the questions. When it comes to particularly the middle and upper, but also somewhat the lower, Many questions also require strong algebra skills, so you'll work with variables to solve equations, simplify expressions, and solve word problems. And then some other subjects that you'll see some questions appear about these are geometry, probability, and statistics. The best way to get a sense of the types of questions you can be asked about each of these subjects is to take practice tests and then determine from there what you should focus on, what should you review or study in order to have a good foundation in those subjects going into the test. So given that there are two different math sections, quantitative reasoning and math achievement, what is the difference between the two of them? Well, the quantitative reasoning section involves more problem solving and critical thinking. And for the middle and upper levels, it also has a type of questions called quantitative comparison problems, which I'll talk more about those in just a minute. And the math achievement section, on the other hand, is more knowledge-based, and it generally requires students to know advanced concepts. So let's talk about a couple questions, look at a couple examples. This is the sort of question you might see on the upper level math achievement. And it says, for what value of C is the equation 4 minus C over 2 plus C equals 0 true? Now, some students may see a question like this, and they might have already been exposed to rational equations, and they know that in order for this to be true, it means that the numerator must be equal to 0, and then they would solve this equation, and they would say that C must equal 4, they would pick answer choice B, and they would be done. Now, in terms of thinking strategically about preparing for the test and taking the test effectively and making the most of the knowledge that you currently have, sometimes you'll see questions, and this may be one of them, that you have never seen a question like this before. In cases like those, don't give up. Don't move on immediately to the next question. Sometimes you'll still be able to answer it correctly. And in this case, we can use a great strategy to still do it, even if we hadn't seen a question like this before. Never hesitate to use the answer choices to your advantage. So in this case, let's start by substituting the value in answer choice A into the equation. So we'll plug in 0, and that gives us 4 minus 0 over 2 plus 0, and that's 2, which is not equal to 0. So that means that A cannot be correct. That's not the right answer. And similarly, if we've just found a value for which this equation is not true, it also can't be true for all real numbers, because that would mean that it always works. So now let's try substituting answer choice B. That would give us 4 minus 4 over 2 plus 4, which is indeed equal to 0. So that looks like that's the correct answer. And moreover, it can't be D, since we've just found a value for which this equation is true. So D is out, and B is definitely the correct answer. And notice again, even though you may not have seen a question like this before, you often can do some workarounds that may help you be able to answer questions that might otherwise look daunting and perhaps not as familiar to you. As promised, they're talking about quantitative comparison questions. These are the questions that show up for middle and upper level students on the quantitative reasoning section, and they'll always look like this. And this is about the level of question you might expect to see on the upper level of the test. Familiarity with this type of question is really important to success on the quantitative reasoning sections, because students who haven't practiced this type of question at all before the test can be thrown off by the answer choices, and especially answer choice D, which brings into question whether or not the question even can be answered. So for these questions, you'll always have column A and column B, which will have some sort of expression or value in them. And then answer choice A will always be that the quantity in column A is greater, B will always be the quantity in column B is greater, C that they're equal, and D that it can't be determined from the information given. So the best way to do well in these is to practice and become comfortable with this type of question. Your strategy for these, the first step is always to determine whether or not the answer can be found. So just take care of that answer choice D that says, there's not enough information to solve this. Ask yourself, do I have sufficient information? If you have all the numbers needed, but you're simply unsure of the correct calculation, that means that D cannot be the correct answer. However, if the answer depends on what value a variable has, or a relationship between values that's not given by the question, then D will be the correct answer. So ask yourself, do I have all the information I need? Are there different scenarios that could be true that would give me different answers? If you could get different answers depending on the values you pick for certain variables, then you don't have enough information to determine the relationship. Your second strategy for these is simply to avoid unnecessary calculations, since all you have to determine is whether the two values are the same or if one of them is greater or which one is greater. Since that comparison is the only thing of importance, you often don't need to do the full calculations of evaluating the exact value for each column, and you can do a little bit more estimation or comparison to figure out which one should be bigger, which can save you a great deal of time. As far as preparing for the math section, many students are unfamiliar with some of the questions and concepts that they encounter on the ISEE, as they haven't covered that material yet in their math classes. The very first thing you want to do to prepare yourself for this part of the test is to familiarize yourself with it. Make sure that you know what to expect so that there are no surprises when you get to the official test. In particular, make sure that you're familiar with new types of questions like the quantitative comparisons that we just looked at. After that, again, with just limited time, your best next step is to review any content that you have seen before but may not remember well. Sometimes there are topics on the test that may be concepts you haven't covered in school for a while, and reviewing any of those areas is a really good place to start. And if you don't have much time, more time to prepare, then the last thing is just to be strategic with your time on every section. Recognize the questions you have no familiarity with and skip through those to make sure you have time to spend on all the questions that you do know how to approach. And then for any of you who do have a little bit more time to prepare, it can be valuable to learn some of the concepts and vocabulary that you might not have encountered yet in school. And anytime, of course, that you study new content, always make sure you practice those questions until they're comfortable so that you won't be implementing them again for the first time when you get to the official test. Some strategies that can help you with these math sections are to start always by reading the questions carefully. This is the first step in doing well in any math question. Avoid making careless errors, calculating the wrong thing. As you read, underline important words and numbers. Pay attention to the units that are being given and make sure that you're always consistent about the units that you use throughout your calculations. Draw pictures to make sure you're keeping track of the information that you have. At the end of every question, after you've solved, check that you found the correct thing. What was the question asking you for? Make sure that that's what the answer that you are giving every time when you're done solving. It's a 1-second check that can save you the sorrow of picking the wrong answer. And something that I'm sure all of you have heard from math teachers throughout the ages, write your work down. One of the best ways to avoid careless errors is simply to keep track of what you're doing. You'll be able to keep track of your thoughts better. You're more likely to do all of your calculations correctly if you're not doing them in your head. And if you come back to check your work, you'll be able to see what you did. In addition, some of those things I talked about, especially for questions that might look daunting, estimation is one of the most powerful tools at your disposal. Oftentimes, the actual calculations to solve a problem may be time-consuming and may be difficult, but with estimation, you may be able to at least eliminate a couple wrong answers. So whenever you start a new problem, think about what the right answer should be. So figure out, should it be positive or negative? Is it bigger or smaller than any of the numbers that were given in the question? Use those estimations to help eliminate answer choices. And then remember that you can work backwards from answer choices or get clues about what your answer should look like based on the answer choices you've been given. And then sometimes with variables in particular, unknowns in the question, you can pick a value to substitute, and that can help to make questions more concrete if working with variables is maybe not as comfortable for you. As with the verbal section, one of the best ways to see improvement with limited time to prepare is through implementing strategies. So learn those good test-taking habits and strategies that I just reviewed in the previous couple slides, and then practice implementing those so that they're second nature when you take the official test. Which brings us to the reading section. For the lower level, you have 25 questions to answer in 25 minutes with 5 reading passages. And middle and upper, you have 36 questions in 35 minutes and 6 reading passages. When it comes to the reading section, time management can be difficult. You have to both read fairly long passages and answer all of the questions. So if you are someone who has trouble reading quickly enough to answer all of the questions, practice skimming through the passages to find the most important information. One of the good rules that can help guide this is that first and last sentences tend to be a good starting point if you're not sure what is going to be most important. Those tend to encapsulate a lot of the main ideas of authors. As you're skimming, answering questions, getting through questions, remember also that it's generally better to get through most of the test, taking your time, answering every question carefully and correctly, than to rush through the entire section and therefore end up missing most of the questions because you're moving too fast. So practice, find the balance that works best for you. A couple strategies that can help you across the reading section are to always identify the main point of the passage. Ask yourself, so what, after reading the passage, and put in your own words, whether it's on paper or just in your head, what you think the main point of the passage was. And that will help you with every question on the passage. It will shape how you find correct answer choices and eliminate answer choices that aren't in line with the point of the passage. And then most foundational to reading comprehension is that there should always be evidence for correct answers. So when it comes to reading comprehension, the text, the passage itself, should always be serving as your reference. And for each question, you should look back through the passage and find the specific place, the evidence, the line numbers that support the answer choice you picked. And if you can't find it, that's probably not the right answer. And so if there's even a small part of that answer choice that's not in the passage, but maybe most of it is, it's not the right answer. The correct answer choice, the whole thing, has to be in the passage in order for it to be right. And last, as I said, with the verbal section, think of your own answer before reading the answer choices. This will help avoid being tricked by the test writers and anything they put there that might look tempting. And another piece of that that is important is to always make sure you read all four answer choices for every question. Occasionally, you'll run into one of the first couple answer choices may look pretty good to you, seems like it basically answers the question, but it may not be the best answer. So make sure you always take the time to read through all the answer choices for every question so that you don't miss the best answer because you're moving too quickly. Some things that are true about answer choices on reading comprehension are that you should always watch out for and be wary of extreme answer choices. So you're looking for words like only, always, never, none, best, worst. In general, on the ISEE, reading passages tend to be fairly moderate in their claims, and words like this usually don't fit with what the author is trying to say. So if you see these, unless it verbatim says that in the passage, this is an answer choice that you should eliminate. General answer choices are often good, and this is especially true for any question that is supposed to encapsulate a larger part of the passage. So main idea questions, for instance, are a place where you're definitely looking for a broad answer choice that encapsulates the entirety of the passage. So the key thing here is to always make sure that the answer choice you pick matches the scope of the question that was asked. So if it's a question that's asking about the whole passage, then your correct answer choice should also talk about the whole passage. If it's a question that's asking about one specific detail, then the correct answer will be about that same specific detail. Be wary of answer choices that are too specific. So especially with main idea questions, again, if it just is like a sentence in the whole passage is about that, that's going to be too specific. You want the answer choice that is really the whole passage. And with that, that takes us to the last section of the test, which is the writing sample or essay. And here you're given one prompt and you have 30 minutes to respond to it. This always gets a lot of questions because it's the only ungraded section of the test. Instead, a copy of the essay is sent to schools along with test scores, and admissions departments use it as an indicator not only of students' writing ability, but also of how well they'll fit into the school community, academically and personally. Part of this is that while application essays can be edited extensively by parents, tutors, teachers, friends, siblings, the ISEE essay is a pure sample of a student's writing, and that makes it a very important component of the ISEE because it demonstrates to admissions departments a great deal about a student in terms of what they choose to write about and how well they express those thoughts. So, some things that you'll want to keep in mind as you're writing your essay. Always start by outlining. This doesn't have to be very formal, but always make sure you do your brainstorming and writing of ideas before you start actually writing your essay. So your outline should always include your main idea. What is your answer to the question? What are you going to say in your essay? What's your main point? And that should always have 2 to 3 supporting points. So things that are going to serve as the topics of your body paragraphs. And so that will be the structure of your essay. You'll start with an introduction, and the introduction will introduce your answer to the question, the main idea of your essay, and also introduce each of your supporting points, which will then be the topic sentences of your body paragraphs. And then always make sure that you save time to write a short conclusion at the end. It does not have to be the best conclusion you've ever written, but make sure that you put it there so that admissions departments can see that you know how to write a conclusion. As you write, make sure that you stay focused on your main point. It's important to demonstrate that you can stay focused on topic. Make sure that your main point answers the given essay prompt. As for each of your body paragraphs, make sure that you have good descriptive details and examples so that it really comes alive for the reader. And most importantly to this whole essay is to express yourself. Schools are trying to learn more about you and what you care about, so you want to let them get to know you. Of course, through all of this, you want to present yourself in the best possible light and avoid anything that could possibly be construed negatively by the reader. And then in the last few minutes of your essay, always save time to edit your writing. You want this to be as polished as possible when it gets to the admissions people so that they're just impressed with how strong your writing is, and no spelling mistakes, grammatical errors, capitalization mistakes stand out to them instead. So check all those mechanics. Spelling, capitalization, punctuation, and grammar should all be as polished as possible, given that, again, they know that you only have half an hour to write this. And with that, now that I've finished going into detail about every section of the test, let's put it all back in the context of your preparation plan. So you're going to start by taking a full-length practice test, which you'll use to identify strengths and weaknesses. You'll review your scores in the context of your target schools, and then focus on the content and strategies that will be most helpful to you. Every time you're learning these new strategies and skills, make sure that you practice implementing them so that you'll definitely be able to do it when you get to the official test. Throughout that preparation process, if there's anything we can help with, just let us know. We are here to help. You can visit our site, which is ISEEpracticetest.com, and don't hesitate to reach out. Here is my contact information as well as our support team contact information. Whether you are a parent, student, school administrator, tutor, anyone else, if you have any questions specific to your situation that we don't get to here, please don't hesitate to contact us, and we would be more than happy to help. And with that, let me take a look at the questions that have come in over here. Will students know how much time is left during each section of the test? Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. And I highly recommend that students get in the habit of keeping track of the time that has been spent and the time that they have remaining for each section. They'll always be told that at the beginning of the section. It's nice to be familiar with it beforehand, so I covered all of that information here. If you have any sort of practice tests, you'll also be able to see it there, just so that you know what to expect, and then you can keep track of your time so that you're pacing yourself reasonably. And then what they always should do is give you a 5-minute warning at the end of the section to let you know that it's ending soon. But I think it's much better, certainly, to be keeping track as you go through to make sure that you're pacing yourself well. I have another question, which is when you get your test scores back. Great question. So if you're interested in getting your test scores, you're looking for your test scores, any of that, we are not the official testing body. That's the ERB. And so you should reach out to them to get your scores if you're looking for those. In general, I believe it takes about 2 weeks for those to be available. But certainly if you're looking for your test scores, don't hesitate to reach out to them. And I'm sure they can help you or let you know when they would be available to you. But 2 weeks after you take the test, I believe should be about right. With that, I'm not seeing any other questions. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any other ones that come up that you did not think of while you were here. Thank you again for joining me today, and best of luck to all of you in the preparation and process and with all of your applications.